Thank you, Council President Katz, and thank you to my Fed colleagues, Councilmember Reamer and Friedson, for working through this bill with me on the committee. And I'm glad that it's come forward. I want to thank DHCA in particular. A lot of work behind the scenes to get this right, and I'm glad you all are up here so you can be seen by the millions watching at home, and we're thankful for you. I also want to thank Amanda and Christine Wellens, who isn't down here, but who tag team and worked on this bill and got it to a good place. I also want to thank my co-sponsors, then Council Vice President Katz, Councilmember Hucker, and then Council President Navarro and Councilmember Rice for co-sponsoring the bill. Just a couple of remarks. So when I originally introduced the bill, I really was thinking a lot about the trauma that Montgomery County residents face when they live in a home, rental home, or an apartment, and when it's condemned for to be unfit for human habitation, which is what we're talking about here, through no fault of their own. And I just want us to think about that, because I think it's important when we talk about the amendment I'm going to offer. This is your home. Imagine if you woke up this morning and you got a knock on the door from DHCA, and they said, you're not able to live here anymore, you need to move right now, or within 24 hours, whatever the time period is. Imagine how jarring and scary that would be to those residents. I know it would shake my whole world up. And so this is an extreme case. This is when things have gone so wrong that a place is uninhabitable, unfit for human habitation. And that's what we're talking about, what the remedy should be. And I think that's important because we want to have maximum flexibility and take care of those tenants that are found in this situation. This is not a theoretical thing. This has happened in Montgomery County. There were 155 cases of condemnations, not all the same, but in FY18, we had residents, Councilmember Hucker and I have been at the Enclave where he led the charge to get all the inspections. There were residents in that apartment building in White Oak that were condemned and had to move immediately. So this is not theoretical. And we did some research looking at, Councilmember Reamer mentioned, Santa Cruz has this law, San Diego, Oakland, I believe, and Washington State. It's become clear to me that 3 months of fair market rent is a better solution here instead of 2. It's important to note that this bill, as was mentioned, is not a intent to have a punitive regime for landlords. The hope is, again, we don't want this to happen. This is a scary thing when it happens. We don't want it to happen. We want the number to go down. And we want to make sure that all of our residents have health-free, hazard-free, habitable places to live. And so that's what this bill is intended to do. Property owners that do not maintain their rental properties, however, and allow them to become unsafe or unhazardous, they should bear the responsibility of their actions. That's an important part of this bill too. If you do something wrong, if you don't maintain, if you're in the business market renting a unit, whether commercially or residentially but in a multifamily or a single family home setting, you have to upkeep that property. It is also important to note though that if the tenant is the person who causes the condemnation because of their actions, or it's something that's out of the control of the landlord, act of God or something, the landlord will not be required to pay. And so I think that strikes the right balance, and that's a determination that DHCA has assured us they can make within their regulatory regime. Another piece of, I think, important part of the bill that we added, it allows the landlord and tenant to work out alternative arrangements. So say you're in a multifamily property and the unit is condemned, but you can move down the hall to another unit or another property that the landlord owns that is in habitable condition. That can kick in prior to having to go onto the regime under here, which is another level of flexibility. Because again, if you're someone that's lived in a place 10, 15, 20 years, you might not want to go out in the market. That's a scary thing, and try to find housing. So this also provides that flexibility. And the last thing I want to do is talk about just the pricing. So DHCA provided us with a list of condemnations, as I mentioned, in 2018, and then what the fair market rents were in the zip codes in the DC, Virginia, and Maryland area, which we're fortunate to have by zip code broken out. Not every part of the country has that. they range the fair market rents from just about $1,200 a month to an efficiency to over $3,200 a month for a 4-bedroom. Those are rare, but that's the range. In the Hillendale Langley Park area, for example, where we unfortunately have a relatively high number of condemnations, the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is nearly $1,700 a month. If a tenant has to provide a security deposit, which is often the case, 1 month's rent along with first and last month's rent, they potentially could have to bring more than $5,000 to move in to a new unit. This doesn't include moving costs, the possible utility or storage costs that they could incur, and you add that, you could get up to $6,000, $7,000. So that's why when we're talking about why 3 months is necessary, I think that's why we need to provide that flexibility. The pro rata rent, as was mentioned, will be provided. That's money that's already been paid. That's not the landlord's money. And security deposits, again, not the landlord's money, will be provided back to the tenant because that's their money. That should not be factored into the calculation, in my opinion, of how many months of rent you should pay. A 2019 survey of Go Banking rates found that almost half of their respondents, 45%, said they had $0 in a savings account. Another 25% said they had less than $1,000 in savings. If you're a low-income family or middle-income family, you do not have savings to fall back on if this happens to you. We have to take that into account, and relocation expenses in that instance, I think, could be very challenging. So we know we have a housing shortage in Montgomery County. We know we have high rent. It's a high cost of living. We've said as a council we're trying to tackle that. And we want to make sure everyone has clean, habitable places to live in our county. So this is not just a housing issue. I think it's a moral issue. It's the right thing to do. And again, it's an incentive for landlords, many of whom are doing a great job, to keep their properties in great condition. So I'd ask all my colleagues to join me in this, and I'd like to offer an amendment, which I distributed to my colleagues last night, to reinstate 3 months fair market rent instead of 2 on this bill. So I'd like to move that be added.